I want to say a few words about the case of polygamy and the Bountiful Charter challenge that's about to emerge. The fundamental thing that's flawed in Canada is the absence of any cultural norms or identity. We're a multicultural society according to the Ottawa religion. That means that there can be no criterion of right or wrong in the official sense. There's certainly no official church, there's no official moral standard, there's no official moral code, and as a result, liberalism, which is the substitute for any values, has become the only criterion of evaluation. And by evaluation, I mean the moral judgment on any form of conduct. The result has been that we have now sanctioned same-sex marriage. We've certainly sanctioned consensual homosexuality. We've given a wide breadth of voluntary association to any form of conduct. Well, having done so, how can the government or the courts in any way now say that referring to Canadian values, they can limit polygamy? Well, what it boils down to is the temporary prejudice of the day will now become the Canadian value of tomorrow, because the courts will impose it. And by this means, we've established Canadian human rights tribunals to impose speech limits that are just sort of the flavor of the month. They are, of course, not morally justified on any grounds in liberal theology, and they are not justified in any moral grounds on any other standard of value. What Canada has done has been to abolish all values. And now, having done so, they have reaped the whirlwind of their own destruction in the removal of any criterion by which polygamy could be rejected. It is, after all, although it's presented as the abuse of women and the oppression of women, it is, after all, in theory, and maybe not in practice, but in theory, it is the voluntary association in marriage of one man with more than one woman. And if that be voluntary, then how can one object when you've already sanctioned the voluntary union in marriage of two men together or two women together? Where do you draw these moral lines based on Canadian values when those values don't exist? And what does this mean for Western Canada? Well, the traditional conservative position of Western Canada, if you look back at every election in the last 100 years, Western Canada has predominantly, although it's voted for change, and it established most of the radical movements in Canadian politics, they were basically conservative in nature. And the Western Canadian value system is really quite clear, and it would not condone either same-sex marriage or polygamy. But no one ever asked the people of Western Canada. They never had a voice. So that's another reason. If you want some sort of fundamental values that are true to your country, then free the West, because you'll never find them in the polygamous polyglot of the Canadian value system of Ottawa. That's the problem. The solution is independence. Let's move towards a better nation of Western Canada.